afternoon. I'd like to invite town meeting members to take your seat at this time. We are in the afternoon session of the fall annual town meeting, and I've been corrected. We are here on October 21st, which is Saturday. So for those of you watching live on Saturday, October 21st, we are here at Plymouth North High School, located in Aubrey Street. We are here at the Center for Performing Arts. We are in our afternoon session, and we will continue with the warrant we have before us on Article 26. We have a motion. Mr. Salerno moves that the town vote to transfer the care, custody, and control of the parcel of land located at 490 Long Pond Road, as shown on Assessor's Map 077A as parcel 000-007-000 and known as the Plymouth South High School from the School Committee for school-related purposes to the School Committee for such purposes and to the Board of Selectmen for the sole purpose of leasing one or more open-air parking areas and related property located on such parcel of land. And you have the full text of the motion. Mr. Salerno will be addressing it. Harry Salerno, Chair, the Advisory and Finance Committee. Welcome.
Thank you. The Advisory and Finance Committee, in a unanimous vote of 12-0-0, recommends town meeting approve Article 26. Approval of this article will effect a technical transfer of the care and custody of the parcel containing Plymouth South High School and Plymouth South Middle School to the School Committee and Board of Selectmen for the purpose of leasing parking and related property and granting easements required for the parking lot solar arrays. This step is required because this project is different from previous projects, as this solar project is installed on town-owned land. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gary Maestas, Superintendent, Plymouth Public Schools. Welcome. Article 26.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of speaking on Articles 26 and the other articles to follow, 27 and 29, relative to the solar project that is at Plymouth South High School. We have been working on Plymouth South High School in the fields. We did come before you in April to extend borrowing, increase borrowing for the turf fields at Plymouth South High School. And when we did present that opportunity, we indicated to town meeting that we were looking at another project that would help fund the lights on Plymouth South High School. So the three articles that are in front of you today are essentially to install solar panels and lights. We have prepared a short video. It's about 4 minutes and 30 seconds that will give you an idea of how all these three articles tie in together and how they impact the information that we're going to discuss here today. So if we could, through you, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to show a video of 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
With the opening of the new Plymouth South High School, the Plymouth Public Schools continues to expand its renewable energy program with a solar lighting project with storage capabilities for the new South High School. The Solar Energy Initiative, also known as PV, or Photovoltaic Project, breaks new ground for renewable electric energy in New England. The completed renewable energy project will generate over 50% of the electricity needs of the building and sports fields. The price of the solar electricity is cost competitive, saving thousands in annual utility lighting costs, and cover the capital investment in sports field lighting fixtures with no expenditure from the town. The innovative Solar Renewable Electricity Systems proposal consists of 3 distinct components. The solar panels will be distributed to the roof of Plymouth South High School as well as the parking lot. The combined solar panels will generate over 1/2 of the new school's electricity consumption. This will include 900 rooftop panels, 1,200 carport panels, which will cover 180 parking spots at South High School. The solar electricity will be stored and managed through e-storage battery technology. Solar electricity will be stored in advanced lithium-ion or nickel-cadmium batteries during peak solar energy production. These solar e-storage batteries will provide low-cost electricity for nighttime sports field lighting. The installation of 19 athletic field lights with high-efficiency 1,500-watt metal halide fixtures located on the 2 new athletic turf fields. The design flow of electricity will be from the solar panels on the roof of the school and the parking lot carport canopies into the South Electric Room to serve the electricity demands of the school and to charge e-storage batteries. On many days, the solar panels can meet a large percentage of the electricity needs of the school, while also storing energy needed for the lighting of the new turf fields. The Plymouth South Solar Energy Project costs are to be totally funded by the chosen developer. Current estimated costs for the project components are $4.8 million, not including possible grants and incentives. Much like the district's other solar projects, this district will purchase electricity from the developer for the next 20 years at a competitive price, saving the district funds in obtaining sports field lighting with no capital investment from the town of Plymouth. Here are the articles pertaining to the Renewable Energy Program at Plymouth South High School. Article 26 addresses the school's authority to lease a portion of the non-building property. While state laws allow school committee to lease space in a school building without town meeting approval, the siting of solar canopies in the parking lot would involve leasing space other than a school building and would require the town meeting approval. For this reason, town meeting is being asked to transfer the property from solely school use to the joint purposes of school use and leasing, with the Board of Selectmen undertaking the leasing. Article 27 authorizes the Board of Selectmen to negotiate with their successful solar developer a payment in lieu of taxes. This authorization is limited to the specific project, which is located on the grounds of Plymouth South High and Middle Schools. Funds received from this agreement will be deposited into the town's treasury in the same manner as other pilot agreements. Article 29 addresses the new requirement imposed by the passage of Municipal Modernization Act, which requires 2/3 vote of town meeting to approve a lease purchase agreement. As part of this project, the field lighting fixtures will be leased for 10 years, with the school district taking ownership after the completion of the lease.
Thank you. Further discussion on Article 26? Yes, William Abbott, please come forward. We're debating Article 26, Plymouth Annual Town Meeting.
Yes, with respect to the lighting portion of the project, I have a question for the school committee. Will these, what will be the turn on and turn off times for these nighttime lights? And will they comply with the Plymouth Dark Sky bylaw with respect to horizontal cutoff and the other requirements in that bylaw? Thank you.
Dr. Maestas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, Mr. Abbott, the lights and the adjustment of the lights will meet the dark sky bylaw that is imposed by the town of Plymouth, and we do have agreements with our other fields that lights turn off by 10 p.m., and that we will monitor for the duration.
Kevin Lynch, town meeting member.
Dr. Maestas. Real quick question or acknowledgement. That was put together by the high school.
It was put together by our staff here and students here at Plymouth North High School.
I thought it was fantastic, unbelievably professional demonstration, and perhaps we might prevail upon you to maybe do that for articles, other articles, because you presented it so well. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Further discussion, we're hearing from Michael Landers.
Mike Landers, Precinct 13. First of all, I want to say I'm in support of this. There are a couple of things that jumped out at me, and I know my questions have been answered, but I'd like to hear it directly. That typically when we've awarded TIF agreements with various companies over the years, The presenters come in with all of the costs and the identity of the actual contractors that through the bid process that's already happened. This is an unusual situation due to cost savings and everything else, and I do understand all of that. However, I wouldn't want to relinquish that ability of town meeting typically in that situation. I'd like to know that this is a one-time, non-precedent setting event as far as the TIF agreements and so forth, and the funding of this particular project.
Yes, and that's relative to Article 27. We did hear some concern from members of the Finance Committee when we presented it to them, and the language was changed in the article to meet specifically the requirements for this project only. Keep in mind that a pilot agreement of this nature can be bargained or not, in the sense if it was bargained, it would cause the price to go up a little bit on the kilowatt hour, but if there wasn't a pilot agreement, it would cause the price to drop a little bit. So it's a matter of how that agreement went, but it's specific to this project, to this property.
Okay. Thank you. So we can expect similar projects with further long-range planning to come forward to us again for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Edward Russell.
Ed Russell, Precinct 12. If we're taking over this system in, I think I heard 10 years, what are we getting? We're getting something that has a tremendously long life,
Sure.
or are we going to have to replace it soon thereafter?
That's a really good question. After 10 years, the town of Plymouth will own the stadium lights. At the close of 20 years, the project, the solar lighting, will have to be agreed upon. The company that developed it would have to come in and remove it, or we would have to negotiate a successor agreement. So at the close of 20, the developer has full rights to maintain it and keep it up and running. If anything breaks, they have to fix it, but it's a 20-year period of time. For the lighting component, after 10 years, the lights become the school district's. Until the 10-year period of time is up, the developer has to maintain the lights. If they break, they have to repair them, make sure they're at optimum utilization.
Alan Costello.
Alan Costello, Precinct 10. Moderator, I was going to ask about some follow-up on the kilowatt hour. Is this the right article to speak to, the kilowatt hour pricing?
I'll let
Or
Dr.
are there
Mances.
all three of them together, or are we doing them independently?
He's presented for all three, so go ahead.
Okay. Earlier in October at the Committee of Precinct Chairs meeting, a member of your staff did a presentation, not quite as nice as this, very, very nice presentation. However, to my surprise, he had mentioned that the bid was going to be due in the very next day.
Sure.
Again, early October.
Yep.
Sort of surprised me, but I've had people tell me that this is commonplace. Even though the article has not been approved, the bid process has gone forward. But my question now is, what did that bid come in at? We can be talking about specifics now. What is the specific kilowatt hour, so we can start to do the math, whether the Finance Committee does it or the Finance Department, so we can actually put numbers to this. What was the winning bid, or were there multiple bids, or have you chosen a contractor at this time?
Well, it wasn't a bid, it was a request for proposal. So we put it out on the street to find out who would be interested in it. And there were 3 companies that responded, and nothing has been awarded, and we cannot divulge the specifics of those requests for proposals because nothing has been awarded.
Can we hypothetically use a number between the 3?
I would say that we are looking at a kilowatt hour price that would be between 10 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour for this project.
Earlier presentations had it closer to 8 cents, but at 10 to 15,
About 10
the
to
project
15%,
is still viable
yes.
at 10 to 15
And
cents?
keep in mind that estimate is based on what we know for incentives. There are other incentives that can be applied, grants that developers can apply for to actually bring that cost down. So again, that's something that the partner that we bring to the table can demonstrate as to how they're going to help us to get this price to a long-term stable kilowatt hour price for long-term sustainability of cost.
Well, how far out would you suggest you would have that information that you could legally pass on to this body so we can make an educated decision on these articles?
Well, that's going to take a negotiation with each one of the vendors that have provided information. So we have to walk through each piece of the contract, each piece of the proposal, so that they can provide a more clarified contract to us to look at. So there's a great deal of negotiation that has to take place with solar of this nature. So that's something that we don't have a definite, accurate price of what the kilowatt hour price would be for our purchase of electricity with them. So that's something that's to be determined.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael Babini.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A question for Dr. Maestes. Again, that was a fantastic presentation. The photo cells and the canopies.
Yes.
At the end of the agreement,
Yes.
Does the town have the right to either accept them as a gift or have the developer come in and take them down? Do they have that option?
Yes, it's in the contract that
Okay.
if we do award a contract with the three vendors, there's a provision in the contract that we could buy it out at the lease, at the end of the lease,
Right.
or they would remove it. And they would bring it and restore it back to the original operations when they installed it. So that would be an option for the rooftop as well as the parking lot canopies.
Thank you. And will they be required to post a bond to be sure they do that? at the end?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Peter Svan, Precinct 15.
Peter Svan, Precinct 15. I understand that we're discussing all three articles at this point.
Yes.
The $4.8 million, I understand there's no capital cost to the town.
Yes.
Under Article 29, you're entering into a lease purchase agreement, which is another form essentially of debt or borrowing. Is there any information on what the annual payments would be over the 10-year period?
The lease purchase agreement is relative to the kilowatt demands of the building. So let's say we are using X amount of kilowatts. The bargain agreement and that purchase price is what Mr. Costello was referring to earlier and what that hourly rate would be. And that's something that we need to negotiate with the developers that are proposing this project.
So even the specific lights for the athletic fields that are beyond the stanchions that Article 29 refers to, that's priced based on kilowatt hours
No,
as well?
the total cost is $4.8 million. And the way the project works, and this is something that we've explained to some of the groups that we've talked to, the way this project works is there's a requirement for the vendor to purchase the lights for the fields, purchase all the equipment that's necessary to install the solar panels, and purchase the battery storage that we talked about, purchase all the equipment necessary to make this work. What they do is they go out there and they bond on their own. They borrow money on their own to go out and create this. What they also do is they apply for state and federal grants that help the developer to bring the cost down. There are a great deal of grants right now for solar energy around the country. They will maximize that. So what they will do is then they will figure out exactly what their costs are, and then they will figure out what a kilowatt hour price is, and we will pay that kilowatt hour price to energize our schools. So let's say NSTAR is going to charge 25 cents a kilowatt hour, what the going rate might be. We would get it at a fraction of the cost that it would cost to actually energize our schools. So we would see a significant savings. We need energy anyway. We would buy it through this solar project, and we'd realize a significant savings in what we could buy it for on the street. So the payment that we're paying on our kilowatt hour price on our monthly bills is not only paying for the power, but it's paying for the lights that are installed on the fields.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin Joyce, Precinct 15.
Thank you, moderator. Would this system be subject to the newly established pilot program that town meeting established a couple of town meetings ago about the pilot program, the rate?
You know, I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of what that rate might be, but if someone from, I don't have.
Maybe some town can tell me.
Can you receive that afterwards? Do you need that now, Mr. Joyce?
Yeah, my wife just made. It's that pond money that we're putting aside. 50% of the pilot program is used for the ponds, research, and so forth.
So in a sense,
and 50 goes into the general fund.
The Board of Selectmen has the opportunity to negotiate that agreement. So that would be up to the Board of Selectmen to determine what is is inserted into that agreement. So I would say that what you're talking about would be counterpart of that.
So it most likely would happen. Thank you, Gary.
I would say so, yes.
Anatol Zuckerman.
Precinct 15. I strongly support this project, and I suggested it before, and I suggested again that the town of Plymouth create some sort of incentive to install solar equipment, solar systems on all public buildings in Plymouth. I know that Plymouth basically is very good on solar, but there are exceptions like the Pine Hills that have unreasonable restrictions to solar panels, and I wonder how and when and if the Precinct 15, Pine Hills development would finally become a part of the town of Plymouth instead of use of solar energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. This is a 2/3 vote. I will first take a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 27. Mr. Salerno moves the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into one or more agreements for payment in lieu of taxes or pilot pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 38H(b) or other enabling authority. Mr. Salerno.
The Advisory and Finance Committee, in a unanimous vote of 12-0-0, recommends town meeting approve Article 27. Approval of this article will allow the selectmen to enter into pilot agreements, if they choose to do so, for the solar array project at Plymouth South High School and Plymouth South Middle School. The committee amended the original article to limit the selectmen's pilot agreement authority to Plymouth South High School and Middle School. Thank you.
Discussion on Article 27. If not, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Article 28 is withdrawn. We then move to Article 29. And Mr. Salerno moves the town vote to authorize the school committee to enter into lease purchase financing agreements for such purposes for terms of years or more than 3 years and up to the useful life of lighting equipment and all related structures and other equipment. You have the text, Mr. Salerno. It's a 2/3 vote and a roll call if it's not unanimous. Salerno.
The Advisory and Finance Committee, in a unanimous vote of 12-0-0, recommends town meeting approve Article 29. Approval of this article will allow the school committee to enter into a lease purchase agreement for the installation of athletic field lighting at Plymouth South High School. The developer will be required to purchase and install LED lighting on 2 multi-purpose sports fields encompassing 7 acres. The school, in turn, agrees to buy electricity from the developer over a 10-year period, with the school district taking ownership of the lighting in the 11th year. The rate the school will pay for the solar generator project is projected to be lower than they would pay without the project.
Discussion. Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously, and I'd also announce that on Article 26, that was unanimous. Article 30, Mr. Salerno moves the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw, Section 205-12, Design Review Board, by deleting the Appearance Code section in its entirety and amending associated items as provided on pages 205 to 213 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Salerno.
The Advisory and Finance Committee, in a unanimous vote of 10-0-0, recommends town meeting approve Article 30. Approval of this article will amend the zoning bylaw, Section 205-12, Design Review Board, by deleting the entire section. Since the board was established in 1972, the level of design knowledge of the Planning Board, Zoning Board, town staff, and consultants has increased significantly, so that the Design Review Board is no longer needed. The board has not met since June of 2014.
Further discussions? Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. I'll now call for electronic voting, and this is on Article 30. When the light goes on, you can vote. It was not a unanimous vote. This is a 2/3 vote and a roll call because we're amending the zoning bylaw, and you can now vote. The light is on. You have 20 seconds. I believe that it shows 137. We only have 135, but there are a couple extra clickers that are available in the event one is defective, so that's the reason for the number. We're continuing to vote, and now voting is completed. The light is off, and we will now hear 106 voting in favor, 8 in opposition. The motion carries by more than 2/3. Based on our earlier vote of changing the order of the articles, we now move to Article 39. Mr. Sirico.
I have a question. Could I move to look at another article again, to bring it up again, Article 16, at this time?
And
I know you got that mallet, but...
Mr. Sirico, did you vote on the prevailing side?
I did. I voted no.
You voted no
Yes, I did.
on Article 16. And now you wish to move to reconsider.
I do, sir.
And because you voted on the prevailing side, and Mr. Pizer will verify that, and we'll have it verified by the electronic voting company, but we'll proceed and to hear you on your motion to reconsider.
Yes, I've been asked by some of the residents in that area if I would consider that, and I would, the fact that they're taxpayers and live there.
Okay. Anyone else care to be reconsider on the motion to reconsider? Mary Ellen Burns, please come forward to the microphone. If you could. Mary Ellen Burns is a West Plymouth town meeting member, and she's also speaking on the motion to reconsider.
Actually, Mr. Moderator, when this came up on the screen, my vote was not registered.
Thank you. You'd like to reconsider. You're speaking in favor of reconsidering?
I pressed the yes button, and it did not register.
You're talking about the last
The
vote.
one that just came up,
Could
yes.
you please see Mr. Alosi and the electronic voting people over there? What was your vote, Ms.? It was yes. Thank you. Next, on the motion to reconsider, Mr. Butterfield, do you care to be heard on that?
Yes, please. Sam Butterfield, Precinct 4. As I stated during the earlier discussion on Obery Street, I'm a resident of Obery Street, and I asked Jerry to consider reconsidering this vote so that we could hear some debate or discussion, at least on the merits of the whole thing, which it didn't appear to me we were able to do during that earlier discussion. So I think there's a lot to recommend it, and I think that the town meeting did not have the opportunity to fully consider all of the issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further debate on the motion to reconsider. It is a majority vote. I will call for a vote if there is no more discussion. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 16 say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. Chair is in doubt. I will have an electronic voting tabulation on whether to reconsider Article 16. So when the light goes on, you'll be voting as to whether or not to reconsider Article 16. It is a majority vote. On this vote, we want to make sure that everybody can register their vote. As it comes up on the screen, please check after to make sure you have been registered. We are voting to reconsider Article 16. The light will go on and you can vote. You'll have 20 seconds in which to cast your vote. You can now vote. Whether to reconsider Article 16, a yes is 1, a no is 2, an abstention is 3, and it'll be recorded. Please check your votes after. We're about halfway through the electronic voting on this procedural motion to reconsider Article 16. This is Plymouth's annual town meeting. It's coming to you from Plymouth North High School. 48 having voted in favor, 72 in opposition. The motion does not carry. We will go back to the warrant unless there are other procedural motions to come before this town meeting? If not, we will continue with Article 39, which is based on our earlier motion to change the order of the articles. Under Article 39, Mr. Salerno moves the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by adopting a new bylaw entitled Commercial Marijuana Establishments, as provided on pages 19 to 20 of the Supplement 1 to the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Salerno.
By a vote of 7-3-0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 39. The majority of the committee felt these retail establishments should be more accessible throughout town and felt comfortable with allowing them by right in light industrial and highway commercial areas and by a special permit process where residents may have a voice in general commercial, arterial commercial, in the airport district. This approval was contingent on Town Council's review of the proposed bylaw and adoption of their recommendations. The changes were adopted without objection by the petitioner and are noted in Supplement 1. The following comments are equally applicable to Articles 31 and 32. Our committee was quite aware that this is a unique moment in the legislative history of our town. This is a new and controversial industry. Passions ran high on both sides of the issue. The committee spent many hours listening to speakers and deliberating on the matter. Summarizing this debate is daunting, but I shall try. The committee recognized the hard work and thoughtful process of the planning board. The committee also thought that Article 39 had its flaws. However, there was a general sense that cutting and pasting to create one article out of several was beyond the scope of our mandate and abilities. Some thought that Article 31 was too restrictive. Others, that Article 39 was too permissive. Most misgivings revolved around the locations of these stores. The debate was also constrained by the fact that it was not about whether or not marijuana may be sold here, but only about where and under what circumstances. Since the current zoning bylaws are silent as to the new industry of legal retail marijuana sales, the town could not prevent a store from opening anywhere retail stores are allowed. Such stores would only be subject to state regulation. Clearly, some constraints are in order, but determining the correct amount of regulation would strain the wisdom of Solomon. In the end, the committee chose a more liberal approach to the placement of these stores and a more conservative approach to their number. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry Salerno, on behalf of the Advisory and Finance Committee. I've not mentioned, but on all these articles, the Board of Selectmen are in support unless we have another motion from the board. You did see in your packet some draft motions to amend. Those are not being offered for motions at this time. This is a petitioned article. We have a petition of presentation, which is up to 15 minutes, and we welcome Stephen Stryer, petitioner. Oh, Mr. Tavares, if you could clarify the position of the Board of Selectmen.
I was just looking for your gavel, but we are not supporting this article that you just referred to, and I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stryer. At this time, it's a majority vote unless we have a motion to fix the method of voting by roll call. So proceed, Mr. Stryer, with your presentation.
So can I make that motion?
Are you a town meeting member?
I am a chair of a board.
We'll hold off on whether or not you make it. Yes. He'll move to roll call. Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this time, is there any debate on whether or not to have a roll call vote? If not, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The motion carries. This will be a roll call vote. Mr. Stryer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, town meeting members. And thank you. For the record, Steve Stryer, 25 Steeplechase, Plymouth. I have a disclosure. I kind of like the way Mr. Withington did it. but I think given the circumstances, I'll probably stick with my straight disclosure. I have a financial interest in a medical marijuana treatment center in another community, and I think that I would certainly be interested to look at the possibilities of operating a recreational facility in Plymouth if a license would become available. So thank you, and thank you for your time. So the goals of Article 39 designate appropriate zoning districts. So our current zoning bylaw was adopted in 1972 and amended several times over the years, but one of the guiding principles of our zoning still stands out, and that is to promote the most appropriate use of land throughout the town. Number two, increase the tax revenue. The law allows for a 3% local option tax and a 3% mitigation payment for 5 years. Average annual sales could exceed $5 million per store. That would generate more than $1.5 million of revenue for the town. Number three, expand employment opportunities. Like it or not, marijuana is a growth industry. Employment opportunities in a number of fields will expand with it. And safety and control is another issue. So with seed-to-sale tracking, testing, government oversight, and regulation, consumers will be able to purchase marijuana in a safe and controlled manner, in the same manner as alcohol. So our current zoning bylaw allows for regulate certain activities in the many zoning districts of the town. Article 39 seeks to regulate through zoning the locations of marijuana establishments. The 5 zoning districts where marijuana establishments would be allowed are light industrial, arterial commercial, highway commercial, the airport district, and general commercial. I'm sorry, 56 years old, this is my first PowerPoint. So our current zoning bylaws, the permitting process, so under Article 39, marijuana establishments in the light industrial and highway commercial will be allowed by right. In the airport, arterial commercial, and general commercial, they would require a special permit. That process allows the special permit granting authority, who in this case would be the Zoning Board of Appeals, to impose significant safeguards, conditions that could include provisions requiring that marijuana establishments address safety, noise, nuisance, and adverse effects on the area. Screening of the site and limitations of signage and advertising will also be regulated. The process also includes hearings at several boards and committees. This will allow for many opportunities for public involvement. According to a 2016 Gallup poll, 13% of Americans, that's 1 in 8, use marijuana daily, and almost 50% have used it in the past. That is over 160 million people. This is why illicit sales, black market sales of marijuana in the United States are estimated to be at least $55 billion a year, $1.5 billion in Massachusetts. The way you change that, the way you start to bring those dollars into the legal, regulated, and taxed market is to shine a light on it, not hide it. By putting marijuana retailers only in the light industrial zone, you continue to perpetuate the stigma of marijuana use, and you marginalize the people who choose to consume a product they may now legally purchase. When you hide it away, you ignore the will of the citizens who voted to legalize marijuana and treat it like alcohol. It's time to change course. It's time to take marijuana out of the black market, out of the hands of criminal drug dealers, and out of the hands of our kids, by providing safe, and convenient, and controlled access to adults in the same manner as alcohol, as the law intended. So, if this is what you imagine when you think of marijuana, or this, if these are the people you see, I ask, why not these people, or these, or him, or your friends and your neighbors? So you have a choice today, and I hope that you support Article 31. Thank you. So, I'm sorry, excuse me. 39. Wow. I don't know how that happened. I just say, I did go home for lunch. All right, well, thank you for the correction. Appreciate it.
I think it's called a slip, Mr. Stryer.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Further discussion? Patricia McCarthy, Precinct 5.
I know there's two separate articles, but I'd like to ask Lee Hartman if he could just give us the basic differences in the zoning between this and the other article that's coming up.
If there's no objection, we'll have a presentation from Lee Hartman. He is Director of Planning and Development. Welcome, Mr. Hartman.
Thank you. So Article 31, which is the town article, really is recommending a cautious approach. The state at this point has not adopted any regulations. We don't even know how the state is going to issue the state permits that will then come down to the local level. So at this point, we have medical marijuana facilities in our industrial park. What the town is recommending is a cautious approach until we know how this rolls out at the state level of allowing this use in the light industrial districts where the medical marijuana is. And the provision here would be to do it by special permit. The Article 31 that is presented by the town, and again, if this Article 39 passes, which is before you, there'll be no motion on 31. It's 39, and as a fail-safe, we'd come back with 31, because without anything, we have no regulations to govern this use in the town. But Article 31 is supported by the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen, the Public Health Director, the Police Chief, and myself. So there's something that, again, we're recommending a cautious approach. And as Mr. Stryer pointed out, the big difference here is in the petitioned article for 31, the use is allowed in the light industrial district and the highway commercial district by right. By right means you don't need a special permit, you simply get a building permit. No negotiations, review of traffic. The highway commercial zone is our Home Depot area and the area around BJ's and the Grove. The petitioned article also allows for the retailers by special permit in the airport zone, probably the more industrial type area you see by our airport, the general commercial zone, which is the Benny's Plaza, North Plymouth, Cedarville, Manamet, and the Market Basket, West Plymouth area. It also says by special permit in the arterial commercial zone, which is that area on Samoset Street by Pilgrim Hill Road, Algonquin Terrace, as well as the Stop and Shop in Shaw's area. So the big difference is, as Mr. Salerno pointed out, a little more liberal that allows it in some areas, some by right, some by special permit, but in more areas, or a more cautious approach, which is really to focus it in the industrial parks until we at least see what the state regulations look like. Always have the option of adding zones in the future if we want to. Thank you.
Randolph Parker, Precinct 7. We're debating Article 39 of the warrant for the fall annual town meeting, and this is coming to you from Plymouth North High School. Randolph Parker on Article 39.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a preface and a question. This article started with language requiring a 500-foot separation from facilities to schools, daycares, playgrounds, and places kids gather. Town Council reviewed and suggested refinements to those places listed in the petition. The refinements identified licensed daycare centers, places dedicated to use by children, like service programs, youth sport facilities, dance schools, gymnastic schools, and so on. It also clearly stated what was not included, like where kids gather in an unstructured environment or in their own homes. Then Town Council submitted a revision to their opinion by striking everything but schools and licensed daycares. I do prefer the first revision. I think others agree. So the question is, why the change by Town Council, in their opinion, from the broad and specific limitations to protect our kids.
Mr. Parker, we have a motion from the Advisory and Finance Committee. I know we have a petitioned article from Stephen Stryer. As far as your question, unless town council cares to answer, I don't think that's before us, but Lauren Goldberg, town council.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, through you. To the speaker, essentially we have concerns about the broad nature of the language, the fact that it's so vague, and that it will likely lead to litigation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the time, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We're continuing with the debate and speaking priority to town meeting members. Peter Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Neville, Precinct 10. I guess I'm opposed to this. I think that the cart may be before the horse, and I would like to think that the regulations we have in place regarding liquor stores should be followed. And I'm not always convinced that more laws, more bylaws help. And maybe we should see how the market goes here. And evidently, I'm alone, or I'm in the minority in thinking that marijuana is a problem. And we can't legislate that away. I think alcohol is a problem, and we can't legislate that away. So, with all respect to the town employees and to the volunteers that have created this bylaw, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. This is Catherine Holmes. I am the newly elected precinct chair for Precinct 8, my first time speaking at town meeting. I just wanted
Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this and say that I will not be supporting it, and I have very valid reasons why. I am a resident of Plymouth. I've been here for approximately 10 years, and I take in foster care children. I take in a significant amount of children that have been abused within the community, and many of that is caused by the drug epidemic that we have here in our area. I'm not to say that marijuana is a problem where it's causing these destitute situations that I'm seeing every day, but I will say that marijuana is in the blood system of the babies that I am taking care of, and it's certainly something that is a real issue. I definitely think that there is a need for medical marijuana and the ability for people to get it, but as a person and a mother who's trying to raise children in this community, I think it's really important that we maybe take a more cautious approach on where we place these facilities. A lot of the people that I have experienced that were mothers and fathers that are drug addicted now where their children are being taken out of custody started with the marijuana use, and it was a gateway drug for them. It's not to say that that's the case for everything, but it's certainly the case for a lot of people within our community. I'm asking you to vote no on 39. I think that the selectmen's approach is more conservative and something we should consider. Thank you.
Betsy Hall.
Yes, I'm asking for clarification through you, Mr. Moderator. Can you describe what the process would be for Mr. Smith, who comes under Article 31 to the zoning board to ask for a special permit? Under what grounds will they give a special permit, and what will that process look like, please?
Lee Hartman is the Director of Planning and Development, Town of Plymouth. Mr. Hartman responding.
Thank you. So the special permit process, and I'd like to point out that just because you don't like something doesn't mean the zoning board has the ability to say no. So special permit gives you the ability to negotiate mitigation. Maybe it's things like, I'm thinking off the top of my head, hours of operation, screening, lighting, security, and build those types of things into a special permit. You can deny a special permit if there are certain impacts, for example, maybe a traffic issue. But again, it's not just whether you like it or don't like the use. When it's a special permit, it's generally allowed. You can impose conditions and safeguards on that permit, but it is an allowed use, and the only way you really get to deny a special permit is if there is something, and again, a good example would be traffic concerns, that would overburden some road or intersection nearby.
Ashley Shaw.
Hi, Ashley Shaw, Precinct 1. I just want to make it clear that I'm speaking as a private resident of Plymouth and no association with the Advisory and Finance Committee right now. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself. I just want to encourage town meeting members to approve Article 39. I think that allowing this industry in Plymouth, I think that we do need to allow it to succeed in Plymouth. And by burying it in the light industrial areas, I think is not allowing this industry its full potential to succeed. So by voting in opposition of this article, I think that it is voting in opposition of the entire industry, because I think that if we're going to allow these industries in Plymouth, we need to allow them to succeed in Plymouth, as well as the fact that it's been clear today that spending is not something that we like to do in Plymouth, and I think that allowing a revenue source in Plymouth that could be so great for this town, I think that shooting that down would be a misstep in our town. So, thank you.
Christopher Houle, Precinct 14. We're debating Article 39.
Thank you. I'll be voting no on question 39. I saw at our caucus meeting for Precinct 14, we heard a pretty compelling argument from a license holder for medicinal marijuana that already has a permit here in Plymouth. And for that reason, the 4,000-foot setback stipulation for Article 39, I feel, is too stringent, but I would certainly welcome some additional input from Mr. Stryer on that specific stipulation.
Thank you. Mr. Stryer, Stephen Stryer, responding to Christopher Houle of Precinct 14.
Yes, thank you. So on the concern that Mr. O'Reilly had regarding the 4,000-foot separation was that the original language did not allow for co-location of the facilities, meaning a recreational facility couldn't open up in a medical facility. That has been addressed through an amendment that's in the article now. So they will be allowed to to co-locate if they can get the permits from the town.
Thank you. Belinda Brewster,
Thank you.
Precinct 5.
Hello. I'm going to not be supporting this Article 39. It's the greater of two evils. I think 31 is the lesser of the two evils. I believe that we need a slow, cautious approach to introducing pot shops into Plymouth. I was very disappointed that Massachusetts as a whole voted for marijuana. As a mom of a teenage son, I find this very troubling. I also find it very troubling, it hasn't been brought up, that it's 500 feet from a school. That is 1/10 of 1 mile from a school that you can have a pot shop. Another argument that I've heard for moving forward with the pot shops, I think they do need to be in isolated areas, not throughout the town. Do you know how many complaints the Board of Selectmen get on the number of bars that there are in the downtown area? So I think we just need to move cautiously in, like, do we really want a pot shop on every corner as well? I don't understand why people are opposed to bars, but seem to be okay with the pot shops. The other reason I think too is we hear a lot of it's a gateway drug. We talk a lot in Plymouth about the opiate epidemic and how we're very concerned about it. And whereas I do not believe every marijuana user becomes an opiate user, every opiate user starts with marijuana. And that is from the CDC, folks. So yeah, and yes, starts with alcohol. How many alcohol-related deaths do we have in Plymouth? I think if we go full bore and having them everywhere, it's going to be a bigger burden on our police department. There are no regulations in place on how to stop a person when they're high. How high is too high to be driving? So I really do feel that between 39 and 31, we should take a very cautious, limited approach. Let's see how having pot shops in Plymouth affects the fabric of our society. Are we going to see increased use of marijuana among our students? You know, they say that you can get any drug that you want in the schools in Plymouth. Well, let's just make it a whole lot easier for them by having pot shops 1/10 of 1 mile where they can easily get them. So I'm hoping that you'll vote no on 39 and vote for the lesser evil of 31.
Peter Curley. We're debating Article 39, speaking priority to town meeting members first.
Today I'll call myself Joseph Curley. My brethren over here is Peter Curley.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Joseph Curley, Precinct 15. Question number 4 was passed by the voters of Massachusetts by a percentage of 52 to 48 in the town of Plymouth, which barely passed in the town of Plymouth. In Precinct 15, the residents of Precinct 15 overwhelmingly defeated it back in November by a vote of 2/3 to 1/3. The town of Plymouth, had it voted by a few hundred more people, would be in a position today of voting whether or not to ban the sale of marijuana in the town of Plymouth. We could do that in the future through a referendum, as did the town of Milford, who passed it, just voted to undo it in the town of Milford. We could do that going forward. The reason for me saying this is that I think the fewer of these establishments we have, the better off we will be, and the more remote they are, the better off we will be. We do not want our children to be walking up and down the streets seeing establishments that will be able to advertise similar to the liquor stores, come here and buy the marijuana. Yes, it will be illegal, but we do not want to encourage it. To the extent that we could place one retail store in Plymouth in the same location as the medical marijuana facility, which has a tremendous amount of security and safeguards built into it, then those that want to go there to purchase their retail marijuana could do so safely and securely, and it would minimize the actual number of sales in the town of Plymouth. So I will be voting against Article 39, and I will be reluctantly voting in favor of Article 31. Thank you.
Wynn Gerhard, followed by Jeffrey DeLappa. Town meeting members.
Yes, hello, Wynn Gerhart, Precinct 13. And I am torn on Article 39. I do think that this industry is coming and that it can be a benefit to the town of Plymouth. And while I, on that point, feel that it would be useful to be distributed around town, I'm here mostly representing my area, my constituents. I'm from West Plymouth. And my main point is that I really want to try to dispel this notion that nobody lives around the industrial park, that it's the most remote part of town and that it doesn't really matter what we put there. So I don't like the as of right provision in the light industrial park. My house is about 500 feet from the industrial park. Some of my constituents and my neighbors are 100 feet from the industrial park. And I think that both West Plymouth and North Plymouth, which border that industrial park in West Plymouth, are amongst the densest parts of Plymouth. So I have a concern with this notion from the rest of Plymouth that nobody lives around the industrial park. And I think with the as of right provision, we would lose the ability to go in on a special permit to talk about traffic concerns or mitigation or all the other things that Mr. Hartman mentioned would be available with a special permit. So that's my concern about Article 39. And that's my general concern, that this notion that nobody lives around the industrial parks and nobody cares. There's many schools around the industrial park. There's schools inside the industrial park. So I just want to point that out, that we have more control with a special permit.
This will be a 2/3 vote. Jeffrey DeLapp, please come forward.
Yeah. Jeff DeLapp, Precinct 11. Just 2 points. I agree. I'm going to support this Amendment 39. And just as to what the woman said from the Advisory and Finance Committee, you can't restrict the potential tax revenue from this industry. And then the other point, I continue to hear, what am I supposed to say to my children? We don't want our children seeing this. We're in the midst of an opioid crisis that maybe if this catalyst was there, that your child seeing this pot shop and to have that hard conversation and instill your family values of, maybe to stay away from these drugs and whatnot, we would maybe less likely be in this crisis, so it would create the conversation to have with your children. But I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Donald Williams, followed by Megan Collins Dempster. We're debating Article 39. Mr. Williams.
I'm reluctant to support this, but I think I am. And the one reason that I am going to, and I haven't heard this argument yet, is that in the light industrial, the volume of the buildings is much larger than in some of the other areas. And if a pot shot goes into light industrial, it's probably going to be taking up valuable space that could get more tax money by having a more intense use. So I'm worried about the tax base in not using light industrial wisely. From what I understand from our caucus, that there are only 4 of these being proposed by either 39 or 31. And I think it would probably be a good thing to consider the intensity of the use that these pot shops would provide in light industrial. They would not be as intense. So I urge you to think about that.
Megan Collins Dempster.
Megan Collins Dempster, Precinct 6. I think that when you start veering off from the subject of whether or not legality or access is the issue, the real conversation that we're having here is whether or not you want to capitalize on the opportunity to take something that's already proven to be or already been accepted by the state voters as something that's going to be legalized, and whether or not you're going to capitalize on the opportunity to get some revenue out of that. So as much as we want to spend a lot of time talking about the social or personal issues, I think that there's a lot of stigma around marijuana, and despite the fact that I think most of my family is known as seafood, I do have a real job, and I work as a forensic toxicology laboratory specialist. And what we do is we work with treatment addiction centers and pain specialists in dealing with drug addiction. And for people who are prescribed opioids, being able to work with them to ensure that they are taking their medications properly. You would be, if you take the extra time to do a little bit of research, you'd be surprised to find out that actually marijuana is used as a very successful therapy for opioid addiction, and has a medicinal purpose in that regard. So limiting some of this access and trying to put more of a stigma on the socializing or the social use of this drug versus some of the medicinal aspects, and the fact that it is shown that, despite some comments, that not all opioid addicts smoke marijuana, there is some therapy behind smoking marijuana if you are an opioid addict, but a majority of opioid addicts actually became addicted through prescription drugs that were prescribed by their doctor, more so than stepping into a pot shop and purchasing their drugs. So we take that kind of social aspect out of it, and we look at this as from a more of a business perspective. I think it's much easier to start broad and narrow down than it is to try and expand once you've got tight restrictions. In my opinion, I think being able to have some access to what we think might potentially be a good template, and then if we find that that's not the best template, we can always make it tighter. But doing it in reverse tends to be a little bit more difficult. Thanks.
John Hammond, town meeting member. We're debating Article 39. Mr. Hammond.
John Hammond, Precinct 4. I'm turning this around because I'm tired of seeing people's backs while they're talking to us, and I've complained about that in the past. Haven't been able to get anybody to do anything about it. These microphones used to be well back, and that was why we had extra microphones. So I hope people will use the central microphone more. I just want to say 2 things. I actually think it's easier to start strict and relax. At least that's what works in my family. And I want to say I'm very ambivalent about marijuana. I think it's like any other mind-altering substance. It can be beneficial, it can be helpful, it can be very destructive. I've worked a lot with kids who both used and sold drugs. If my child was going to get a hold of some marijuana and try it, I would prefer that they buy it from a licensed person whose product is tested for purity than from somebody who was a salesman for a criminal enterprise.
Michael Landers.
Mr. Moderator, I move the question.
It's a motion to close debate on Article 39. It is not debatable. However, anyone who still cares to be heard can remain standing. Thank you. And at this time, I will take a voice vote on whether to close debate on Article 39. This is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. The motion carries. We have now closed debate. We will now go forward and vote on Article 39. It will be a roll call vote, and it requires 2/3 in order to pass. Get ready with your clickers. Look for the light to go on. We will be voting. Point of order. Let's hold off on the voting. What is the point of order? They are not been presented. Those motions to amend have not been offered. You were just voting on the main motion from the Advisory and Finance Committee from Mr. Salerno. Any other questions? If not, we're going to go ahead and vote when the light goes on. And this is on Article 39. It's a 2/3 vote. Thank you. Please vote. You have 20 seconds. We have 135 elected town meeting members who are voting on the petitioner's Article 39, which is a vote from the Advisory and Finance Committee. We are completing the vote here at Plymouth North High School on Saturday, October 21st. We've completed the vote. We're now looking for the quantum of vote as reported. 43 in favor, 77 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion does not carry. We now move forward in our warrant to Article 31. Mr. Tavares moves the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw by adopting a new bylaw entitled Marijuana Establishments as provided on pages 222 to 223 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. This will be a 2/3 vote. It will be a roll call vote. Does anyone care to speak on behalf of the motion under Article 31? Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development.
Just a clarification that if there's a no vote on this Article 2, that means that they would be allowed anywhere where you can buy cigarettes or gummy bears. So our recommendation is to have something on the books. So again, we would recommend that you support this article.
Harry Salerno, on behalf of the Advisory and Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee, in a vote of 3-7-0, recommended town meeting not approve Article 31. Article 31 and 39 were competing articles. They were mutually exclusive. Since we voted to recommend approval of 39, we voted not to approve 31. And that is how our recommendation remains. The committee recognizes that without a set of bylaws and zoning restrictions, marijuana stores may be placed anywhere retail is allowed without any unique restrictions. Such stores would only be subject to state regulation.
Patricia McCarthy, do you care to be heard? No. Michael Withington, do you care to be heard? This is like to tell the truth. No, you go first. Okay. Michael Withington, Precinct 5, on Article 31.
Yes, I'm just on Article 31. If I'm correct, it says the separation from schools is still 500 feet, and all recreational establishments, it's 2,000 feet.
Anyone care to
Is there a reason for that?
reconfirm?
And if it is, can we extend the 2,000 feet?
Are you looking at a table? If it's,
Yes.
No, so the only thing in the Article 31 is the separation of 500 feet. The 2,000 feet is not in Article 31.
I realize that, but what I'm asking is,
Can you do it?
all recreational establishment, it says 2,000 feet, or so there's no,
Right, the problem with, I don't know what a recreational facility is, so on the fly would be.
school.
500 foot is school.
Okay,
So-
can we extend that?
You can. When we talked about this through the planning board and with town council, our concern is that we focus this at the light industrial district, and once you start making bigger setbacks in a small area, you start to really start to maybe get to a level of unreasonable regulation. So we looked at that very issue, and we decided to stay with 500 because the article does focus it in a localized area, which is light industrial.
And Lee, the reason why I'm asking is 500 feet, I think, would be the
Yes.
end of the building, wouldn't it be?
500 feet is a regulation that's already in place for medical marijuana too, so that's where the 500 comes from. It's what's already out there.
Different thing in going to a doctor and going to a.
I understand, but since this is a fairly localized area, we felt far more comfortable with the 500 foot. To go greater might open up a different can of worms.
I'm perfectly willing to open up that can of worms if 2,000 feet, if 1,500 feet is going to put recreational marijuana out of
2,000
business.
feet, 2,000 feet may end up with an absolute prohibition of the use anywhere in the town, which would cause another set of problems, which again is why we recommended the 500.
I'm perfectly willing to open up that can of worms.
Mr. Withington, I understand your comments. I do not have a motion from you, nor will I accept a motion unless it's in writing and having been reviewed by the Director of Planning Development and Town Council, but my general impression is we're not going to be drafting legislation on town meeting floor. The opportunity to have done that would have been prior to today's town meeting because there are a lot of ramifications. You can always come back in the spring. However, if you do wish to draft a bylaw change, please put it in writing and submit it, and we'll review it. Thank you.
I'll be back at the spring town meeting when
Thank
the
you.
buds are blooming.
Thank you. Betsy Hall, town meeting member.
He doesn't know much about marijuana. The buds are blooming right now. I think. I wouldn't know personally.
Your time is ticking.
Yes, my time is ticking. I would like to readdress what Wynn Gerhard said. And we used to hear that, and still hear that down where I live. You know, the exit 3 below that, that's the hinterlands. Who cares what happens down there? And I think we should take Wynn Gerhard's comments to heart. I voted against Article 39 because of the special permit and by right pieces. I don't want this to be by right. So I would like to ask my fellow town meeting members to reconsider Article 39. I did vote in favor of it with with the provision that these 4 or 5 pop shops can go into more than one place in town. However, they're all by special permit. So that would be an amendment to Article 39, I guess, if my fellow town meeting members agree to hear it. And I did vote on the prevailing side. Because based on the idea that putting all of these in one part of town does put a burden on one part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Caproni.
I'm concerned that we're going to leave the building without any regulations, and it's our job. We have to have these regulations, and I thank the town leaders for putting forth this article, and I thank Steve for putting together his article also, but we're kind of debating the morality of marijuana, and that's not what's in front of us, okay? Pat Nixon declared a war on drugs. We lost that war about 40 years ago. Now's its time to engage. All right, I have no interest in using marijuana. I don't want children or grandchildren to do it, but they have to have that choice. And I believe if they could do it in a controlled and professional environment like we're talking about here, it's going to be better than where they get it now. And don't get mad at me, all right? The place they get it now is the parking lot right outside this school. That's where they get it, okay? So let's stop the madness and approve this article.
Mr. Landers, do you have a procedural motion?
I do. I'd like to move this question.
It's a motion to close debate. We'll now have no more debate. We'll ask who still wishes to be heard to stand, and you'll see the people who are still standing. And at this time, I will take a voice vote on whether to close debate on Article 31. All those in favor of closing debate say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries by more than 2/3. We'll now move forward on Article 31. It is a 2/3 vote. It is a roll call vote, and we will vote by roll call electronically. When the light goes on, you can begin to vote on Article 31. Please begin voting. You have 15 seconds in which to vote. (106) having voted in favor, 16 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion carries. We now move to Article 32. Mr. Salerno moves that the town vote to amend the general bylaws by adopting a new bylaw as Chapter 115, marijuana, as provided on pages 220, 221 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. It is a majority vote and a roll call if it is not unanimous. Mr. Salerno.
In a vote of 9-1-0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 32. Approval of this article will amend the general bylaws relating to the retail sales of marijuana. The majority of the committee felt comfortable with the vetting process of the planning board. It seemed that limiting the number of retail marijuana stores to 20% of the number of liquor licenses was a reasonable first step, as the state recommends. The hours and separation requirements appears reasonable. The committee reminds you that without a set of bylaws and zoning restrictions, marijuana stores may be placed anywhere retail is allowed without any unique restrictions. Such stores would only be subject to state regulation.
Christopher Favor.
Christopher Favor, Plymouth resident. My whole concern I have is the hours of operation. You know, Sunday, 9 to 8. I mean, so you have a choice. You can go to church or get high. I mean, that's really where we're coming down to, if you think about it. And I think it's something to think about. You can laugh all you want, but I think there's a lot of people who think that some sort of morality is missing. And I think when you think about that, we set certain restrictions when it comes to alcohol. We used to, you know, I think having that type of thing in the morning, I think is just a little over the top, to be honest with you. So just think about that. I can't make a motion to amend, but someone could do that. Thank you.
James Williamson.
Thanks, folks. I just want to take a second to share a story with you. My name is Jim Williamson, by the way. I work in part as a bouncer downtown at a bar. Who here has been downtown at a bar late night, 1 o'clock in the morning recently? Some of us. What does that look like? Let me paint a picture for what it looks like for you. I got out of work the other day, 12:45, went to get my only drink of the night at a friend of mine's bar. A drunk patron knocked out that tooth and busted my lips for no reason. I got sucker punched. What doesn't happen at pot stores? Getting punched in the mouth. So I just kind of want to share that story with you guys. I appreciate your time. Consider that when we think about, again, the morality of it. Because I think there's, a couple dozen places that sell alcohol downtown, right near our schools. And the last thing I want to say, too, I have 35 dead friends from the opioid epidemic. I'm 33 years old. I graduated Plymouth South 2002. 35 dead friends. None of them died from smoking weed. So, thanks, folks.
Further discussion, Article 32. Paul Brennan is not a resident from the town of Plymouth. Unless there are objections from town meeting, Mr. Brennan would like to address town meeting. Paul Brennan.
I did grow up in Plymouth. I graduated from Plymouth South High School in a class of 2000. I am a small business owner. I'm a landscaper who does 100% of my business here in town. I only just recently moved to Carver, and I am here at the request of dozens of my fellow Plymouth, my friends from Plymouth. And the reason is because I have the courage to stand up here in front of a lot of you and talk. In addition to being a landscaper, I also currently work professionally in the cannabis industry. I've been teaching at New England Grassroots Institute in Quincy for the past 3 years, advising people on home grow and how to ingest their products safely. I am on the board of advisors for the Mass Recreational Consumer Council. I have testified multiple times to the Massachusetts Recreational Marijuana Board, as well as just last week to the Cannabis Control Commission. So, going forward with regulating this industry, specifically zoning, I'm just going to highlight what I said to the Cannabis Control Commission last week, because I think I need to remind everybody that the state hasn't even implemented these regulations yet, and we might be jumping the gun if we're looking to over-regulate and zone specific businesses out of the community before we're even allowed to get going with them. I'll look at my phone here. This is what I just said to the Cannabis Control Commission at the State House last week. My name is Paul Brennan. I'm a resident of Plymouth County, where I own a home and property. I'm also a parent and a small business owner. I have several concerns about our recommendations for the regulation of this new legal industry, specifically regarding the right for adults to socially consume in a safe environment, as well as regulations that allow for the cultivation and distribution rights of small growers and farmer cooperatives, as well as other infusers to create a cottage boutique industry. I am a good person, and I like weed. I use cannabis medically as a registered Massachusetts medical marijuana patient, but I also use cannabis recreationally as a safer and healthier alternative to alcohol. What good is all of this legalization if we, as responsible adults, still have to hide in the shadows of industrial zones to consume? Shouldn't we be allowed a safe environment to socially engage in responsible cannabis use, just like those who responsibly enjoy alcohol? I don't think I need to remind anyone, based especially on what Jimbo just said, that by all measurable facts, if we look at all data from across the country, all of the science supports overwhelmingly that cannabis is by far safer and poses a less risk to public health and the safety of our children than alcohol does all day. So should we continue to have to sit at the bar and sip cup after cup of water or soda while skulking out to our back alleys, or even worse, to our cars, to sneak in a few illicit puffs? We need protections and safe spaces to take our cannabis use away from that which makes us seem still like criminals. It's now legal, and it's time to allow for a certain degree of normalization by allowing open cannabis users to remain an active part of our communities and local economy. I think what a lot of us are forgetting is that this industry is a lot more than just pot shops. There is going to be cultivation centers, there's going to be testing laboratories, there may be cannabis cafes that serve cannabis to patrons. I think that it's important that here in Massachusetts, as here in Plymouth, nestled among the dozens of establishments that line our historic downtown district and back again, that serve alcohol to residents and tourists the world over. I think we need a setting just like that that serves cannabis-infused products in a model modeled after our serve-safe regulations, modeled after our liquor licensing regulations, modeled after the regulations that already regulate hookah bars and cigar lounges across the state. These regulations would potentially include language restricting indoor use to only vaporization and infusions as a means to promote harm reduction and responsible use. I can go on about several other businesses that I'd like to see. Catering, social clubs like the John Alden Sportsman's Club or the Garibaldi, where instead of alcohol we can consume cannabis. I don't want to see the town miss out on all of the business opportunities and all of the tax revenue that can come from this. Look at how much money
30 seconds.
We have a potential to put 3% tax revenue on every single cannabis product sold in this town of Massachusetts, in the town of Plymouth. With how much money we've already raised with 0.75% on food, that 3% can go a really long way. This is the fastest growing industry in the United States of America. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I don't want to see us all miss the boat based on others' ideals of morality. Thank you.
Mr. Brennan, we're continuing to debate Article 32. It's a majority vote and a roll call if it is not unanimous. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will have voting by electronic voting. When the light goes on, you can vote on Article 32. This is a bylaw change. It requires a roll call. When the light goes on, you can begin to vote on Article 32. This is on the warrant for the fall annual town meeting, and you can now vote. Town meeting members are voting. They have 20 seconds in which to vote. There are 135 town meeting members. We are live on Saturday, October 21st at Plymouth North High School. This requires a majority vote. We'll be continuing on with the warrant upon the completion of this vote, and town meeting members are now concluding the vote, and we will now have the vote totals, and you see them in front of you. 111 in favor, 8 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion carries. Article 33 is withdrawn. Article 34 is withdrawn. Article 35 is withdrawn, and we now move to Article 36. Mr. Salerno moves that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw and official zoning map of the town of Plymouth by changing the zoning designation of land on Manamet Point Road or Old Colony Drive Road. You have the text, 2/3 roll call, and Mr. Salerno.
In a vote of 6-1-0 with 3 recusals, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 36. Approval of this article will rezone the Symes House property from small lot residential to transitional commercial. The committee spent considerable time listening to speakers both pro and con. The matter was debated quite thoroughly, and the majority felt this zoning change will help the Symes House reach its full potential. The town, using community preservation funds, recently invested some $4 million to renovate the property, creating 2 affordable housing units, 4 offices, and 4 meeting rooms. The property will be used as a community center as well. The town has contracted with Manamet Village Common, Inc., a 501c3 organization, to manage the property. MVCI is requesting this change in zoning to clarify that office use is permitted by right and to broaden the scope of events that can be hosted at the facility. Thank you.
John Moody is the petitioner. He is speaking on a presentation as president of the Manamet Village Common, Inc. Donna Curtin will be joining him in the presentation. Welcome, Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, town meeting members. The good news about Article 36 is that it signals that we're almost done for the day, and it doesn't ask you to appropriate any money. In fact, this article is about positioning the Symes House for financial independence from the town and success in delivering on the promises for which you have already graciously funded the resurrection and repurposing of this historic property. Manamet Village Common, Inc. is a 501c3 organization formed in August 2016 with the specific intent of pursuing the property management agreement from the town of Plymouth for the Symes House. A core team of Manametians worked for more than 18 months exploring and planning the use of the property, how it would benefit Plymouth, and how to make the house a self-sustaining facility. We took cues from the discussions here on town meeting floor on what expectations you have for the property in exchange for the funding needed to breathe new life into this once majestic home so that it could serve the needs of the community for many years to come. Article 36 proposes to rezone the 1-acre parcel of the Symes House from residential small lot to transitional commercial, a very modest change in zoning that will allow the business offices on the second floor by right, rather than as an exception under the zoning bylaw, and broaden the scope of public use activities to include events that are not community or educational oriented, such as baby showers, family gatherings, birthdays, and similar activities. As you know, the Symes House has been renovated to include 2 affordable housing units, 4 business units, and 4 meeting and event rooms. The affordable units and business suites, as proposed to you at the outset of this project, provide the core revenue required to operate and maintain the house, with uses of the first floor meeting rooms along with fundraising activities filling the gap between the expenses and revenue. The public use space of the first floor will be Manamet Village Community Center, hosting meetings of local government and local government boards and committees at no cost. Other uses would pay a fee that ranges from between $40 and $60, depending on room size, while nonprofits would pay approximately 50% of the standard rate. Current zoning allows use for the community and educational purposes only, which limits the number of potential uses that would pay a full fee. In addition, we would much prefer to offer the facility to nonprofits at the same low rate paid by government boards and committees, $0. Transitional commercial zoning would broaden the uses the public space could be used for, permitting Manomet Village Common to rent the facility for business meetings, seminars, and personal events. Allowing such events would increase opportunities for full fee rental activity and quite probably enable Manomet Village Common to offer the facility to nonprofits at no cost. The second reason for the zoning request is that despite the determination by the town that the business suites are an allowed use, doubts raised by some members of the community and by some potential business lessees about the appropriateness of the business units in the residential zone appears to be limiting our ability to lease those offices. While we have parties interested in the business units, some do have reservations about entering into a long-term lease at the facility because it is in a residential zone. The change to transitional commercial zoning would allow the business suites by right, removing the concerns of potential tenants about the office use. We are seeking the change to create an environment in which Manomet Village Common can be successful in making the Symes House a self-sustaining facility, which we believe is the principal objective here and has been since town meeting first approved funding for the project. We realize there is zero appetite for an ongoing subsidy to operate the facility. In fact, our property management agreement with the town relieves the town of any financial agreement with any financial responsibility for operations and maintenance of the building, placing Manomet Village Common 100% on the hook for those costs. We firmly believe a self-sustaining operation is possible and that Plymouth and its residents sorry. I should have put them on to begin with. We firmly believe a self-sustaining operation is possible and that Plymouth and its residents derive substantial value from the community center operation. This article requests your approval of Article 36 to support our efforts towards self-sustainability. Our estimate, and I've lost track of where my presentation is at. Our estimate of annual operating expenses is $80,000, with utilities, maintenance, and insurance being the principal large cost categories in that estimate. The affordable and business units provide the lion's share of revenue, approximately $62,000 to meet those expenses, leaving $15,000 to $18,000 to be raised through community center operations and ongoing fundraising activities. We have initiated the creation of a network of local residents to provide ongoing programming for the community center focused on small classes and events. The community programmers, through an associate membership, would receive a discounted room rate based on volume of use, making a variety of educational and personal development classes, workshops, and services traditionally found at community centers across America available at the within the Plymouth community. Our financial model for community center utilization indicates that at 25% utilization, which amounts to roughly 2 events or classes per day, approximately $23,000 would be generated annually, closing the gap in paying the operation and maintenance expenses for the building. A snapshot view of allowed uses in the R20, SL, and transitional commercial zones highlights the very limited nature of this zoning change. The additional use of interest here is the last one on the transitional commercial list, which is our focus for prospective tenants. Although a small antique or gift shop or art gallery or studio are not beyond the realm of possibility. The parcel map before you reflects the Symes House parcel's design, in particular the two parking areas at the rear on the right-hand side and at the front on the left-hand side of the property lot, and the entry and exit drives to the front lot. You can see them coming in from Old Colony Drive and exiting out onto Manomet Point Road. This map is germane to the concerns that have been raised about traffic and parking. We believe the on-site parking for 30 vehicles is consistent with the requirements of the zoning bylaw for the type of facility and operations planned. Some neighbors, about 25% of the neighbors have registered some complaints about traffic and parking. We have taken steps to address the traffic issue. We've issued some temporary signage or put up some temporary signage that drives the traffic into the parking lot at the front of the property. And that seems to have addressed the traffic issue with the neighbors. The parking, we believe the parking in the area is adequate for the plan that I just discussed with you about having small classes and events. We believe the 19 spaces at the front of the property are more than adequate to accommodate that kind of business. The last issue that's been raised is really about spot zoning. This was originally raised, but we haven't heard much about it recently. Spot zoning is not an issue here because of a substantial body of evidence provided by both the Plymouth and the Manomet Village Master Plan, as well as the general commercial zone right across the street from the Symes House, and the size of the parcel in comparison to other parcels. We don't believe that a court would find this to be a case of spot zoning. In closing, Manomet Village Common believes the proposed community center fills a need in the Manomet Village and Greater Plymouth area for meeting and community use space. The benefits the public through that use and as a center for personal development of residents. It fills the revenue gap, making the facility self-sustaining, and formalizes the open space village green in the heart of Manomet. We respectfully request your approval of Article 36 to complete the vision originally brought before you in 2012. With that, I'm going to ask Ms. Donna Curtin to please come to the podium and issue a few comments regarding the proposal.
Donna Curtin, Precinct 3. Okay. The Symes House project was a trailblazing endeavor for the town of Plymouth. The concept was to bring all of the components of the Community Preservation Act together: affordable housing, historic preservation, to a lesser extent, a little bit of open space, to create a historic and active center of community for the village of Manomet. Well, we've learned trailblazing is difficult work. It's never easy to do something that hasn't really been done before. And historic preservation projects are especially challenging. But if you've seen the restored property, and I hope every town meeting member has taken the opportunity to do so, you'll see the impressive results of a very considerable effort by the town and by many local volunteers. I'd like to bring us back for just a moment to the beginning of this process. This now elegant historic building was a blight on Manomet, a creep show of dereliction and neglect. Thanks to the concerns of local residents and the actions of this town meeting, what was once an abandoned eyesore is now a beautiful historic emblem for the village of Manomet. And I defy anyone to say this isn't an improvement and a betterment for all of the properties, commercial and residential, in the Symes House neighborhood. A new group has now undertaken the management of the Symes House. They've developed a sensible and pragmatic business plan that's appropriate to the scale and limitations of the historic building and is sensitive to the concerns of its neighbors. They're asking for one bump up in the zoning chain from residential to transitional commercial for a property that has been used historically and indeed for most of its lifespan for other than residential purposes. It's been a long time since this was a home. This is a request we should say yes to. We've invested a great deal in bringing the Symes House back to life, and it makes no sense not to provide the key tool needed to keep it that way. I hope you'll give your support to this article. Thank you.
Thomas Kelly, Precinct 6. Welcome, Mr. Kelly. We're debating Article 36.
Tom Kelly, Precinct 6. I'll be brief, but I really can't be brief, and I'll try to watch the time because I've been here for a while. This is my 25th year. In any debate like this, we really have to drill into the facts and not the emotion. I know a lot of people in this room put many years of work into this, okay? I understand it. I supported it the first time around because I said the CPC money was coming. We should get a piece of it and man it. I supported it the second time after the Civil War that went on down there, and we now have a building done versus having a half building done. I can't support this, and there's a number of reasons. First, Mr. Rudy was required to come back with a planning from the Mr. Travaris for the Board of Selectmen to take a position. They never did because they don't have one, okay? On top of the concerns that the neighbors will bring up, I think Sandy's still here. There's a number. I was contacted months ago, and I couldn't believe that we couldn't do what we were told to over the years without a zoning change. No one ever mentioned that to anybody here. And you can look to check the records. I follow government all the time. It was never told to us at town meeting when we approved this money that we would have to have a zoning change in the future. We made an error. You can call it a mistake. I have some people look at me and say, you called it a mistake. It was a mistake. The due diligence wasn't done. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. What I am saying is that you're compounding what we did. I support the present use. The neighbors support the present use. The road back there is 15 feet wide. I measured it. All the owners of properties around there will not let you have any parking in there because they have a sign up, the biggest place, the plaza. I spoke to Mr. Petrol. He says, I have a sign up there because I'm going to tow people's cars out of my lot because of liability purposes. And for his own zoning law, he needs spaces for his own commercial space. So none of those businesses can give us space. Now, when we look at it, I don't have the liberty of doing that with the plan there, but you see Mr. Moody put up about the parking in the front. He says 19 spaces. You heard him just say that they'd come in from Old Colony Avenue and go out on Point Road. Well, Chief's here. He can discuss it with you. He can verify everything I'm going to say. I had an email back and forth with him. When the first group put in the sprinkler system there, they had to put in what they call a PIV. It's a fire word for a post indicator valve. It's a 6-inch valve, a 6-inch pipe coming in for the sprinkler to the building. They wanted that. The fire department wanted it in the back. Symes Group at the time didn't want it in the back. They said, we'll put it in the front. But at the same time, they agreed that that front area, which was the original driveway, will never be a driveway. And Mr. Bradley's here. He can confirm my email discussions. So I don't know how you're going to have cars come in a 15-wide road through a set of bushes, put 19 cars, rear end to rear end, and get out of there because you can't use that entrance in the front unless we pay to move the 6-inch water line and then protect that valve. That was never the intent of what you just saw from the original numbers. So I go back to the point is the Board of Selectmen have not made a decision on this because Mr. Travaris' requirement was to come back with a written document saying we can park so many spaces by our own kind of bylaw in so many areas. That's number one. Two is the parking. The zoning bylaw, they can have as many events as they want. The RFP, they can have as many events as they want. And I'll just leave you with this. We are using the heavy hand of government to squash people that I have spoke to that are against this, that say, I can't afford to hire zoning attorneys to fight this for their protections. They're depending on us to do what's right and protect them, okay? And when I look at it, you say, wait a minute, we created the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We did. Now, some people might take offense to that because they didn't vote for it, but we did.
22 seconds.
Collectively, the town government made the mistake. We didn't do a due diligence. Now we're coming back here trying to balance our mistake on the backs of these neighbors. Our zoning laws, we do here all the time, we just did a bunch of them, is to protect our investments in our homes or our business. I'll finish with this. A number of years ago, Barry Wood was up here.
Mr. Kelly, how much longer do you have?
About 30 seconds.
Do you have a motion to extend? So move
Barry
second.
Wood asked for
Any
the same
further
thing.
discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor to extend 30 seconds? Opposed?
Barry
Thank you.
Wood asked for
Continue.
the same thing. He lives right next to CVS. He has a business there right now. He came in and everybody and from the top to the bottom said, zoning extension, we don't want you to do that. There's no parking and traffic. So he doesn't get it, but we get it, or we try to get it, because we're the town and we have the heavy hand of government. It's wrong. It's morally wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We are attacking our own. We're the guys that are supposed to be setting the rules, and we're bending
you,
the
Mr.
rules
Kelly.
because of what we did. Thank you.
Virginia Johnson, followed by Michael Hanlon. Welcome, Virginia Johnson.
Virginia Johnson, I'm from Precinct 7. I live right down the street from the Symes house. And I've lived there for years and years and years, back when the Symes house was just a wreck. So I'm generally pleased, just as a citizen, to see such a beautiful facility. I would like everybody to vote on this zoning change, because I have been going to the meetings of the Village Common that is going to be running this facility, and I can attest to how thorough and how careful and how creative they have been in problem solving for the Symes house. No renovation of that size is without problems, and the problems that I've been hearing about are things that are can be solved, and solved with some more hard work and creativity. This house is not only quite beautiful inside, but it's historically accurate. And one of the things I always liked about Plymouth was how beautifully they keep their historic artifacts without destroying them or making them tacky. And the Symes house is a very good example of a very good restoration. And so I would just like everybody to remember that we spent a lot of money on this, that the Village Commons, it promises a self-sustaining building, and I believe the Village Commons people really know what they're talking about, because they've already solved a whole lot of problems, and a lot of the problems are financial. So please vote for the zoning change. Make it a little bit easier for them to continue their work and to have a beautiful community center. This community center will affect not only Man and Bent, but I'm sure that a lot of people from South Plymouth would like, and Cedarville, South Plymouth, which is a huge area and growing all the time, and they would like a community center and not have to always go into Plymouth Center to do things. It's our community center in the South. So please vote yes on the zoning change. Thank you.
Michael Hanlon, followed by Frank Collins.
Michael Hanlon, Precinct 15. I want to speak in favor of this article. I've heard Mr. Moody's presentation at least 4 or 5 times. I've heard Mr. Kelly's comments at least 4 or 5 times. I agree with Mr. Kelly on only one issue, and that is the issue of why are we even here discussing this. This rezoning should have happened years ago. It didn't, apparently. somebody dropped the ball. We should all be disappointed by that. But as I said, I'm here to speak in favor of this article. We have spent $4 million of taxpayers' money. I voted for this the first time it came up at $1.5 million. I'm not sure I voted for the second iteration at $2.5 million, but I'm supporting it now. We spent $4 million of taxpayers' money. I can't imagine not voting for this proposal and basically throwing that money away. People have expressed concerns about the parking. I have no concerns about the parking. Mr. Moody suggested that there's sufficient parking. I agree with that. There are other ways to deal with parking. I have no doubt that Mr. Moody's organization will deal with it effectively. As to the neighborhood's concerns, people have valid concerns about noise, lights, cars, traffic, things like that. Those are sometimes valid concerns. Once again, I have no doubt that Mr. Moody and his organization will deal with that. They have engaged with the neighbors, and they'll continue to engage with the neighbors. The rezoning is what is essentially a residential neighborhood. I don't think it's inappropriate. It's not as if this rezoning is in the middle of, surrounded by residential. There's other commercial operations in the area adjacent to abutting this property. I think it's totally appropriate to approve this rezoning. So I am hopeful that all of you will support this. I think this is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Frank Collins, we're debating Article 36 on the town meeting warrant before you this afternoon. Welcome, Frank Collins.
Frank Collins, Precinct 6. When this was initially proposed 5 years ago, I felt strongly enough against it to prepare a 2.5-minute presentation to convince town meeting we should vote against it. I apparently didn't present that good an argument because I convinced 11 others to vote against it, and 106 of you voted in favor of this. I find myself 5 years later, after spending $4 million of taxpayers' money, to have to come here and argue for it. I'm a pretty pragmatic, it's not that funny. I'm a pretty pragmatic individual, and if we just say walk away from it, we'll take about a $3 million loss of taxpayers' money. To change the use of it to transitional commercial doesn't really significantly expand the use. Most of the uses, it is proposing to use are permitted under the present zoning. So I don't look at it as being something that's particularly onerous to the neighbors, although I haven't heard directly from any of the neighbors. To me personally, there were a few questions at town meeting caucus, but pragmatically, I urge you to vote in favor of the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, I want to remind town meeting members that we have a bylaw that requires we take a recess at least once every 2 hours. Mr. Salerno moves to extend this town meeting beyond 3 o'clock in order to complete the warrant. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. At this time, we'll be continuing. However, we will be taking a brief recess at 3 o'clock. We'll now continue. Procedural motion, yes. Move the question. Motion to close debate. And at this time, there'll be no debate. Anyone who cares to be heard, you can remain standing. Thank you. Okay, and now we'll take a voice vote on whether to close debate. All those in favor of closing debate say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. The motion carries. We now move to Article 36. It's a 2/3 vote. It's a roll call. Please get your clickers ready. When the light goes on, you can vote. This is on Article 36 on the warrant, and you can now vote. You have 20 seconds in which to vote. 1 is a yes, 2 is a no, 3 is an abstention. We are voting on Article 36. We will then conclude with Article 37. You have 8 seconds, 6 seconds in which to vote. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone. The vote is now going to be shown. 93 in favor, 26 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion carries. Mr. Salerno, before we take up Article 37, do you have a few remarks to make? Mr. Salerno, before we take up Article 37, do you have closing remarks?
I want to thank you all for your attention and your respect for the Advisory and Finance Committee's work. I hope it helped you in your deliberations. I especially want to thank the committee for all of the hours and their effort to make this all happen. And of course, thank you to Kerry Gillette, whose Herculean efforts really makes it all possible. I look forward to next... I look forward to next town meeting, where it's more about budgets and less about Solomon-esque decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Brian Alosi, to thank Kerry Gillette, my office manager, Beth Marino, and my office staff, Larry Pizer, the boards and committees, the town meeting members, for your attention. I'm glad I didn't have to use a mallet today. And at this time, we'll continue with Article 37. We have a motion from Mr. Salerno to amend the zoning bylaw. It's a 2/3 vote, a roll call vote. Mr. Salerno.
The Advisory and Finance Committee, in a unanimous vote of 10-0-0, recommends town meeting approve Article 37. Approval of this article will amend the zoning bylaw and create a building height overlay district. The committee recommends a 60-foot height maximum in the overlay district. Plymouth Industrial, Commercial, Office Land Study Committee identified allowing increased heights in Plymouth's industrial parks as a high priority. Increasing building heights will maximize high-quality development in areas already zoned and developed for such uses, encourage commercial development that offsets the residential tax burden, and provide quality jobs for residents. Thank you.
Article 37 is a 2/3 vote. It is a roll call vote. It is a petitioned article. We have the petitioner, Michael Hanlon. Mr. Hanlon, do you care to be heard on your petition?
Okay.
Michael Hanlon, petitioner.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Hanlon, Precinct 15. I took my sweater off because I was getting a little warm. So you all know this proposal is to increase the building height from 35 feet to 60 feet by right in an overlay district. A lot of people have asked, does this involve or include Camelot Park and other industrial parks? The answer is no. This is only the light industrial park between Route 3 and Commerce Way in North Plymouth. This article has received unanimous support from the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, North Plymouth Steering Committee, West Plymouth Steering Committee. Everybody's in favor. I hope you are too. The whole goal here was to increase revenue for the town of Plymouth from non-residential taxpayers. That means commercial and industrial operations. My very strong belief is every dollar of revenue we get from industrial commercial establishments is a dollar that the residential taxpayers does not have to pay. Very simple math. It may be more complicated than that, probably is, but that's my simple math. One of the, you may have seen, well, I went to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. Before I got up and spoke on my article, they heard a presentation by a guy from RKG, a consulting doing work for the Economic Development Foundation. One of the comments from that gentleman was, we are saturated with retail development. We don't need any more Home Depots, Stop and Shops, Walmarts, whatever. What we need is high-level commercial development that brings high-paying jobs to this community. That will generate greater tax revenue. But more importantly, or just as importantly, it will create a community where people can live and work in the same neighborhood. And maybe we will have to stop. I commuted to Peabody for 5 years until I couldn't stand it anymore. That was crazy. People commute all over the place. If we create more jobs, high-paying jobs in this community, maybe we can work and live in the same town. So if you have any questions about this proposal, I'm certainly glad to answer them, but I hope you will support it. Thank you.
It being 2 hours since we last commenced, we'll take a 30-second recess. Convenient. Article 37, we're going to continue with the debate. Betsy Hall, are you at the microphone? Do you care to be heard? Betsy
Yes.
Hall. We're debating Article 37. This is Plymouth's annual town meeting. Betsy Hall.
John Hammond, I'm in front for your sake. You asked for speakers to come up front. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I agree with everything Mr. Hanlon says. I have two questions and two concerns. One is that I don't believe an impact study has been done, that we have information about how this new zoning will affect Wynn Gerhardt's neighborhood or the neighborhood of North Plymouth. We just heard an article on how development on Obery Street has caused great hardship and to the people who live in this area, and I don't want to create that kind of hardship for the people who live in West Plymouth and North Plymouth. So if we have not had an impact study done on this, I will vote no on this article until that's done. Secondly, I would like to know what kind of fire equipment this town has that meets the 60-foot fire department's requirement. Thank you.
Anyone care to respond to the question? Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development, responding. Thank you.
Thank you. So on page 246 of your packet, you'll see the overlay district. And as we went through this process, the areas of the abutting residential neighborhoods has been excluded, which is basically the Resnick Road areas of the industrial park. So to address those concerns, those areas have been excluded from the overlay district. Really impossible to do any kind of environmental impacts review because you don't know whether there's none, 1, 2, or 5 buildings. So there really would be no way to assess what kind of impact this might have environmentally. And there was one other question.
Fire department.
Fire suppression. So these buildings, as we talked about it at 75 foot, and the chief is here if he'd like to get up to at this late hour, but they're all internally controlled with sprinklers and fire suppression systems. So as we talked with the 75-foot height, there's no concern with fire suppression because the buildings are all completely sprinklered.
Betsy Hall.
Lee, I was thinking of a traffic impact study, not an environmental impact, although both would be great.
Lee Hartman.
So we have, at times, as we've looked at this whole corridor, looked at the traffic impacts. And, you know, it's a case-by-case basis depending on what the use is.
Chief Bradley, care to respond regarding fire? Chief Edward Bradley, Plymouth Fire Department. Welcome.
Lee covered most of those. These buildings nowadays are going to be automatic fire detection system as well as suppression system. They'll have standpipes. So the fire protection for us is going to be built into the building, kind of like less that we have to bring in. As far as our aerial trucks, right now we have one that's 100 foot. We are due for, I believe it's going to be in April at the town meeting, to replace a 75-foot aerial. It will be 100 foot, and it will cover that. But the buildings themselves are built with protection in mind, and they're much safer, obviously, than they were in past years.
Leonard Vaz. Leonard Vaz, thank you. Mr. Vaz, the town meeting member.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Leonard Vaz from Precinct 1. Here we go again, folks. The last time they came in, they wanted 75 feet. They weren't very successful. Do we want the people that come into Plymouth on 44 to see these big high rises and say, we're like in the city of Quincy? Let them live with what we have. How many times has somebody refused to come to Plymouth because we don't have 55 feet or 75 feet? I think if we stayed the way we are, we'd be fine. These want to build a building, spread the footprint of the building. Make it go sideways or backwards or frontwards. Leave it alone. I urge you to vote no on this. Thank you.
Win Gerhard on the Article 37. We're debating Article 37 of the Plymouth Fall Annual Town Meeting. Win Gerhard.
Thank you. Win Gerhard, Precinct 13. So I'm up here again in terms speaking about our neighborhood industrial park in West Plymouth. I do understand the need for jobs and economic development, but I think we as a town have to spread this out. I mean, Mr. Hanlon says people can live and work in the same place, but this is a huge town, and the industrial park is in one corner of town. I think, again, we have this assumption that we can default everything to the industrial park, and nobody lives there, and it doesn't have an impact. And my neighbors, myself, my constituents, and the North Plymouth area also live there and have a major impact, which has not been studied. The last time this came before town meeting, I wasn't on town meeting, but it was 75 feet, and it included the Camelot Industrial Park also. And I, from reading the paper, understand that Mr. Vaz spoke, and the sentiment happened to be, the vote was prevailing that we don't want to look like Weymouth. We don't want to look like Quincy. We want to maintain the character of Plymouth. This time, there's some changes in this, which I think make it even more negative. It doesn't include Camelot Park for some reason, and I actually tried to amend that, but it was too late. And it also is as by right. So all of my neighbors and myself would have no right to go in on a special permit to talk about traffic and talk about mitigation. And I think we have to look at this, if we are looking at the whole area of the industrial park, it's not in isolation. We are surrounded in that area by all of the commercial, all of the retail at Colony Place, at Cranberry Crossing, because again, the default has been, let's put it in that part of Plymouth. So I think that there are major issues when you look at the whole area, both for the neighbors and for everybody coming into Plymouth in terms of traffic. And we wouldn't have the right to bring that up if there's no special permit, if it's by right. I also think that there is already excess capacity in the industrial park. A friend of mine is the business manager of OCB, the ophthalmic building that they just built. They built this brand new building. It's only 2 stories. They occupy the first floor, and they have not been able to rent out the second floor. The whole half of the building is empty. There's other buildings in the industrial park that have excess capacity. So to say that we need more commercial space is just flawed. There's another building that was permitted, I believe, between the Spalding Rehab and Glen Electric. The construction has stopped because they don't have tenants. So, and I've also heard some comments about how this would, people would, instead of building a new building next to an old building, that what would happen with buildings would be torn down that are already there to build a 6-story building, which to me makes no sense, especially when we don't have capacity to fill the existing buildings. So I'm very concerned again about the impact on our part of town, and if we make it as of right, I think we're going to look like Quincy and Weymouth, and that's not why I live in Plymouth. So I urge you to vote against this. Thanks.
Thank you. Unless one of the town meeting members wishes to make a procedural vote, I'm going to go through my list. Next speaking, Karen Bukes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to thank Mike Hanlon for taking the time to read the 18-month Industrial Lands Committee report that Lee Hartman sat on, my husband sat on, Belinda Brewster, Mark Garrett, a lot of good people. Took a long time to see what Plymouth could do to bring in more money. We lost Cisco. They went to another town. Why? Because there wasn't room, right, Lee? There wasn't room. So we just turned down the waterfront, our tourist destination, and we need places to bring in businesses. Insurance companies need at least 2 to 3 floors. The reason why some of those are empty is because we don't have the adequate room for it. I, for one, am very appreciative of you, Mike, for doing that, taking the time. And there has to be more of you doing things like that, because these things tend to sit on a shelf and collect dust. Thank you.
Lawrence Delafield. We're debating Article 37, Annual Town Meeting Warrant. Mr. Delafield.
Yes, Pompey Delafield in 12, Precinct 12. I just want to reiterate a little bit the idea that you have these impact studies are very important. Anyone who comes down 44 knows that Colony Place has a very definite impact on this town. A 5-story building is going to have a bigger impact on this town. My concern about this is I wouldn't be nearly as concerned if it was Camelot Park, but you're talking about the intersection of the 2 major entrances to Plymouth. And you're saying you want to build that out, and yes, you can follow Mr. Hartman, which I understand fully. We don't know what the impact is, but by zoning, you hope the impact is going to be maximum, because that's why we're doing it. We're doing it so that it will get built out. So we have to look at the impact of what that means, and I don't think anyone has done that visual impact, and I'm not sure some of the other impacts have been sufficient. So I think that we need to do an impact study that really reflects Mr. Tessera's concern that we are a tourist community, and we do not want to build out right at the major entrance with 5-story buildings, which may not suit the needs of this town at all. Thank you.
Brendan Brady.
Brendan Brady, Precinct 10, called to question.
Move the questions. Closed debate. It's not debatable. Those who still wish to be heard are standing. I will now call for a voice vote on the motion to close debate. All those in favor of closing debate on Article 37, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries by more than 2/3. We will now proceed to vote on Article 37. It is a 2/3 vote and a roll call if it is not unanimous, and we will now have electronic voting on Article 37. When the light goes on, please vote with your clickers. Unless we have any further votes today, the last motion, please vote. You have 20 seconds. Hereafter, we'll have Mr. Salerno's motion to dissolve. So, 2/3 vote, a roll call on this. We're having it by electronic voting. Town meeting members are voting, and we have 5 seconds to complete the vote on the electronic voting. Thanks also to the vendor from the electronic voting. We've completed the vote. 98 in favor, 19 in opposition. The motion carries. Unless there are any other matters to come before this town meeting, Mr. Salerno moves to dissolve this fall annual town meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. This town meeting is dissolved this afternoon at 3:14 p.m. Thank you.